Jai Shri Radhe. Sab Vaishnavanko, Jai Shri Krishna. Today is day 146 of our readings of the 252 Vaishnavas in English, and we are continuing with the story of the merchant from Agra, the story about the melon. It was an hour before the Utap and Seva when the two of them got up and bathed. The merchant bathed and entered the temple. The renunciate bathed and went into the fruit and vegetable room to prepare the afternoon offerings. He could not find the melon in that room. He felt most perplexed and thought, see, that merchant wrote down the melon that cost 1,000 rupees. He did not even ask about it. If he does not see the melon, he will think that I took 1,000 rupees from him and used the melon as an excuse. I spent 1,000 rupees on a melon, but the Lord did not even get to accept it. Oh, I am such a foolish bad man. I am full of faults. Why would the Lord ever want to accept my offerings anyway? In this way, the renunciate was full of despair. He then prepared all the other temple fruits, as he usually did, and entered the temple. The merchant was just opening the temple door for the afternoon Utap and Seva. Sri Thakurji was sitting on his throne with the melon in his upraised hand. The merchant was delighted to have this holy sight. He addressed the renunciate Vaishnav. "O Vaishnavji, you have brought such a wonderful melon today for Sri Thakurji that he is holding it aloft in his lotus hand. Go and see." The renunciate was also overjoyed to see this. All his sadness was dispersed. Then Sri Thakurji said to the merchant, "You are great. You did not ask the other Vaishnava why the melon he had brought cost 1,000 rupees. You have complete trust in that Vaishnava, and I am very pleased with both of you. Please ask me whatever you would like." The merchant piped up, "What I want is always to have such pure feelings towards Vaishnavas which will ever increase, so that I shall never have any kind of negative thoughts towards them." Sri Thakurji was very pleased with him. Then the Lord addressed the renunciate, "I am very pleased with you too, because you bought me a mango that cost 1,000 rupees. Ask anything of me." He answered, "O Lord, please let me always have the association of this merchant. Because of him my mind has become pure. Let us forever live in this way." Sri Thakurji agreed. The merchant asked Sri Thakurji, "O dear Lord, shall I take the melon and prepare it for you?" Sri Thakurji replied, "This melon is very, very dear to me. Let me keep it for today. I shall play with it. Please prepare it tomorrow afternoon." The merchant said, "But dear Lord, the melon will go bad by tomorrow." Sri Thakurji replied, "I have touched the melon. Now it will not go bad. Do not worry." The merchant bowed to his Lord, washed his hand, and proceeded to prepare and offer the usual afternoon's fruits. He also completed the Lord's Seva until he had taken rest for the night. He then came out of the temple and said to the renunciate Vaishnava, "Oh, you are most fortunate in that Sri Thakurji so lovingly accept the melon that you offered to him." The renunciate Vaishnava replied, "You are most fortunate, and to be thanked inasmuch as you have such spotless faith in a Vaishnava." The merchant said, "What belongs to me? All I have belongs to you too." The two then went to partake of Mahaprasad and then sat for their reading of divine literature. They did not sleep until the middle of the night. An hour before sunrise they got up, performed all their daily ablutions, bathed and entered Seva, which they completed up to the Rajbhog Arati. They bathed again before the Utap and afternoon Seva. The merchant entered the temple, and the renunciate Vaishnava sat down to prepare for the afternoon offerings. He prepared the melon and offered it to the Lord. The merchant celebrated this event most enthusiastically and put aside donations for both Srinathji and Sri Gosaiji. He sent these to Gokul. He made many special offerings to his Sri Thakurji and then invited all the Vaishnavas of that village to partake of Mahaprasad. He gave every one of them a small portion of the melon. It had an amazingly divine taste, and everyone felt much bliss. Bhav Prakash. The moral of this story is that one should put trust in Vaishnavas. One should keep the company of Vaishnavas, and this will give immediate joy to the Lord. Thus concludes Varta 125, the story of the two Vaishnavas, one merchant and one renunciate, who are the recipients of Sri Gosaiji's great grace and most accomplished Vaishnavas. There is no end to their tale. Continuing to Varta 126, the story of a Vaishnava from Gujarat, Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Tamasi disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Dohini, who manifests from Sashikala and is thus a form of her divine loving sentiment. Part 1. Sri Gosaiji had travelled to Gujarat when this man saw him, he had the vision of Sri Gosaiji as the Supreme Lord himself. He requested Sri Gosaiji to initiate him with the Lord's name. Sri Gosaiji told him to bathe, which he did. Sri Gosaiji blessed him with initiation with the Lord's name and Brahma Sambandh. The Vaishnava then inquired of him what his duties now were, and Sri Gosaiji told him that he would grant him the favour of the Lord, which he should do. do with total dependence on him. The Lord is all-powerful, so you must never doubt his divine intention. The Vaishnava replied, but O Maharaj, I have doubt in my mind. Only you can help me to disperse it. Sri Gosaiji asked him to tell him what was his doubt, and the Vaishnava said, the Lord surely remembers those who are close to him, but what about those who live far away in other places? Sri Gosaiji replied, listen, Sri Thakurji is the Almighty Lord. He is the creator of all worlds. He knows everybody's mind, otherwise he would be known as the Lord of all. Otherwise would he be known as the Lord of all? He is most compassionate and protects everyone. Hearing this, the Vaishnava felt very happy. Sri Gosaiji presented him with one Swarupa of child Krishna to serve and explained all the ways of Seva to that Vaishnava, instructing him to serve very lovingly. Sri Gosaiji returned to Gokul and the Vaishnava proceeded to serve his Sri Thakurji exactly as Sri Gosaiji had told him. He was totally absorbed, body, mind, heart and speech, into his Seva, and after many days had passed in this way, Sri Thakurji granted him the experience of his divine presence and would ask the Vaishnava directly for anything he wanted. Bhav Prakash. The moral of this story is that a Vaishnava should always depend totally on the Lord alone. The Lord is all-capable, therefore one should never have any anxiety about one's worldly or scriptural situation, but rather should absorb themselves completely into their divine seva. Thus concludes Varta 126, the story of one Vaishnava from Gujarat who was the recipient of Sri Gosaiji's great grace and an accomplished Vaishnava. There is not really an end to his tale. Varta 127, the story of Damodar Jha, a Brahmin from Baranagar. Bhav Prakash. This is a devotee of Sattvic disposition. In the eternal Leela, his name is Indra Prabha, who manifests from Neela, and is thus a form of her divine loving sentiment. He was born into a Nagar Brahmin family in Baranagar village in Gujarat. He was a devotee of Shiva. He was only 8 when he began to study academically and became a very qualified professor. His parents died when he was 22 years old and he lived alone. In that village, most of the people were Shaivites and there was a small number of Vaishnavas. Part 1. Damodar Jha called the Vaishnavas silly tilak wearers. He said that the Vaishnava path had no Vedic foundation. The Vaishnavas of the village all went together to see Sri Gosaiji in Gokul, and they told him about Damodar Jha. O Maharaj, in Baranagar there is one Brahmin named Damodar Jha. He thinks himself to be a great pundit, but he mocks our tilaks and says that the path of grace has no Vedic foundation. Therefore, O Maharaj, he needs to be properly informed. Having had the sight of Sri Gosaiji, the Vaishnavas returned to their village. Some days later, Sri Gosaiji passed through on his way back from Dwarka, having had the holy sight of Sri Ranchorlalji. He stayed with one Vaishnava in the town. One day after he had partaken of Mahaprasad, he was sitting comfortably, and all the Vaishnavas sat before him. He asked, "Who is it who said that the path of grace is not founded on the Vedas? The path that Sri Vallabhacharyaji has revealed is the most superior." Bhav Prakash. His meaning is that all other paths are based on the three sources, the Vedas, the Srimad Bhagavat, Gita, and the Brahma Sutras. Sri Acharyaji's path of grace is sourced not only to those three, but also on the Srimad Bhagavatam, thus rendering this path superior. We cease the reading today at this point, and will continue tomorrow. So this is Varta 127. Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Shivallabh Adi Shaki Jai Ho, Sab Vaishnavan ko Jai Shri Radhe, Jai Shri Krishna.